Hi, I'm Denise Griffitts, and this is your partner in Success Radio. And today's conversation is about the American justice system, including our rule of law, with returning guest Larry Aldrich. Now, Larry is the co author of one of my very favorite books, What's Right with America and How We Can Keep It That Way. And it's a book that takes a clear, grounded look at the United States through history, data, and the principles that have helped shape and sustain it. And together with his co-author, Paul Johnson, he makes the case that America's real strength doesn't come from slogans rather, or politics, but from something much deeper: individual responsibility, the rule of law, and a system of checks and balances that keeps everything working as it should. It's a perspective that is both data-driven and optimistic, focused on what's working, why it works, and why those foundations still matter today. And this is absolutely one of my favorite books, and I highly recommend it. You can find it on Amazon. Larry, welcome back. It's so good to have you here. And as you know, as I've just waxed eloquent about it, your book is one that I come back to often, and we've got the 4th of July coming up pretty soon. You and Paul were my guests, I think, 2 4th of July. You showed up on the 4th of July to share that book with me, and I really appreciate it. So welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Denise. Thanks for having me. And I think it was actually last 4th of July. So
Was it? It seems longer
yeah,
than that.
time seems to
Yeah.
be speeding up.
Oh, it does.
But I'm delighted to be back and delighted to talk a little bit about the book and more importantly, to talk about what's happened since the book. We have in Arizona, but also in partnership with others across the country, have launched a new political party trying to help those of us who are independent, have registered not as a Democrat or Republican, but as an independent. Might lean Democrat, might lean Republican, but there's a reason independents register without part of either major party, and it's because they aren't happy with those parties. And so, our new political party, which is now called the Arizona Independent Party, is really trying to focus on the issues of interest to independents. And we're only in Arizona, but we are partnered with other independent parties around the country. So I think you'll hear more about it. Your audience will hear more about it over the next several years, and we will try to make some waves and try to put at least a little competitive pressure on the two mainstream and, in some ways, very old-fashioned political parties.
I was reading somewhere, and I don't probably X, that there's a big upsurge in people saying, "I don't want anything to do with either of you. I'm going to be independent." And I understand that. I really do. When
Yeah,
you
I
can't
think
trust the
the
people that are allegedly, and I'm using air quotes, leading you, you've got to find another place to go.
All right, I think the latest Gallup survey, which came out, I believe, in early in January, or then again, it could be a year ago, January, showed that about 45% of all new registrations across the country are with people who don't designate a party, otherwise known as independents. That's reflecting a high level of frustration with what we have. I think most people and their families at their business and their community, they walk and talk and deal with people of who have different views, different opinions, and to get anything done, especially in a family. I mean, you have to have conversation, and ideally, you have some compromises, and you come up with something that works for everybody. That's what America used to do very well. We used to solve very big problems, based upon the view of one party or another party, but based upon a compromise, which is what I think the voters wanted. They want their representatives to analyze the issues, talk to people who know what they're talking about, and then coming up with a solution that works for, say, 70, 80% of America, not what works for 10% of America or 15% of America. It's very frustrating. And I think the other piece is most people, and Denise, a little bit of my background, I did some work in the healthcare business, and I love working with doctors, some of my favorite people. Very difficult to have 400 doctor bosses, which I did at one of my jobs. And but those doctors would think every day that their patients were patients every day. And we were patients maybe 1%, maybe less than 1% of our life. We don't think of ourselves as patients, we're people. The same thing with politics. Our politicians think we live and breathe, eat, drink politics all day long. And frankly, we don't even want to think about politics until it's around the time to vote, either in a primary or a general election. And then we want them to represent us. They are public servants. They're supposed to serve the public and the greater public, a majority of voters and Americans. And they just have failed to do that over the last 10 to 20 years in any meaningful way. So it's a concern to many of us that, we are doing some really great things and have done great things in America. But can we continue to do those great things through government? Or are we only going to rely on the private sector because government can't get its act together? So we think it's an important move and an important movement to try to change the outcomes, the results, the better solutions to America's problems.
When you said through government, I automatically wrote down despite government.
Yeah,
It's
as
just automatic. Sorry.
paraphrase Ronald Reagan, and one of the five worst words in the English language. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. I think it was actually nine
Yeah.
words.
But
But
everybody just shudders like, oh my God.
But you look like what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, we wouldn't expect the private sector to be running our wars. We expect government to run our wars successfully. We expect government to defend our borders successfully. We expect government, I think, to take care of the least advantaged, the poor in America, both privately with charitable help, but also the government has a role to play to help the most abject poor. We expect a good country to do that. The problem with we can get into the nuances and some of the details of this. The problem is, since the New Deal in the 30s, there's a sense that the federal government is going to solve all of our problems, and everyone has forgotten that when the Constitution was created, 200 almost 250 years ago in 1987, it set up a limited federal government. It says it specifically in the Bill of Rights. Basically, the federal government is a limited government, that the state governments have higher powers than the federal government, and that the people have the highest power of all. And we've kind of flipped that equation. And I've heard many presidents, but most recently President Trump saying, well, I'm the president, I can do anything. Not per the Constitution. You are supposed to administer a limited government. And that's been a problem that the federal government has invaded so many walks of our lives with federal policies. I rant all the time when we get through shutdowns, and then all of a sudden we hear that some little community in like Coolidge, Arizona, a small upstate Arizona town, they might lose their bus service because of the government shutdown. And I go, what the frack? Why is the federal government funding buses in Coolidge, Arizona? Frankly, why is the federal government funding police across America? Not federal police, local police. Why is the federal government funding school teachers across America? The states and the local communities can do that better. But because no one's paying attention, and then the states and the locals don't have to raise their taxes to provide the services that their residents expect, we just punt it to the federal government, and then what do we get? $40 trillion of deficits that we're going to leave to our, well, at my point, my kids, it's too late for my kids. Maybe my grandkids or great grandkids can figure it out. So those are all, challenges, and we have just kind of been whistling past the graveyard here when it comes to the incredible impact on our lives of federal government, and as importantly, incredible detriment to our lives that the government not living within its means is creating for us and for our futures.
And right now we're hearing all about grift and graft and outright theft,
Absolutely,
which is terrifying. I mean,
it's
when you
terrifying.
look at the numbers, and even if they make your eyes water and you go, oh, it can't be that bad, I think it is that bad.
It is that bad, and, that it's just gotten worse. Each president layers on top of what the last president did, takes more power, and then they're in such a position of power that it's so possible for somebody to, in effect, put a bribe right in place, which shouldn't happen, but does. So hopefully, we can put some, reality and some checks back in. And let me, Denise, just dive back into the book and just briefly, and then we'll get to the political party. But I really appreciate your constant statement of our book being your favorite book.
I
It's kind
love
of one of
that
kind
book.
of one of
I keep
one of my favorite books too, but
I
I wrote it.
absolutely love that book. When you guys sent the book to me and I read the title, I went, "Okay," and I sat down and I read it instantly. I didn't wait, I did the page flip because I read books 2.5 to 3 times before you come on. And when that book landed, I just took some time that day, and I'm a speed reader, so I read through it very quickly and went, "Oh, I get this." And then when I read it again, when it was time to review it, I really read it, and then, of course, I read it again before you guys came on the show. It
Right.
is, I'm not joking, one of my very favorite books. As far as I'm concerned, I read it, but it's also a keepsake.
Oh, thank you. And for your listeners, it was written before AI arrived, so
It was, yeah.
it is not an AI written book, and we certainly used AI to make sure no one was plagiarizing or stealing from somebody, which made sure never happened. Sometimes accidentally that happens. So that was a nice check in terms of our ability to ensure for our publisher that everything was legit and on the up and up. So the book, Denise, and your listeners, really focuses on what makes America great. And what makes America great is the rule of law. The Constitution created the structure that enabled us to basically live, operate, be successful in America. The focus of our founders of America, who were amazingly creative people who created a government that really hadn't existed and never had existed in the way that America existed, but really harken back to what was happening in ancient Greece, to the democracy in Greece and the city states there, and how the people basically were viewed as the power base around those communities. So the founders looked at that. They looked at the writings of the early philosophers. They looked at the writings of the 17th and 18th century philosophers, the writings of Adam Smith about the economy, and really created a structure in America to empower individuals. So that you mentioned at the intro, that's the power of the individual to allow people to do what they want to do within the context of a country where we kind of give up some individual rights to actually live and operate. We don't get to decide what side of the road we can drive on because we changed our mind and we have to follow some of those rules. But to create a structure, to create a rule of law that enabled individuals to flourish. So individuals could then marry who they wanted to, practice whatever religion they wanted to. They could work where they wanted to. They could get trained and work in another place where they wanted to. They could work locally in their communities. They could build walls together and fences together and barns together, or they could basically close their door and in the privacy of their homes, just be whatever they wanted to be. And so that whole structure of the founders was to build that the framework for the rule of law, which then we passed laws federally, states. And I'll say what I said earlier about the power of the states. The state there, the 13 colonies came together and eventually became states under the Constitution. But they all existed before the federal government was even imagined. And they had their own constitution and they had their own laws. And as part of the creation of the United States, they had to give up some of those powers. Individuals had to give up some of those powers to create a federal government that could work on behalf of all 13 colonies and then states. But the power of the state constitution doesn't derive from the federal constitution. It derives from their state constitutions. Many of them started by business. I mean, many of those colonies had a charter from the King of England, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the Virginia Bay Colony. Basically, was a charter by the King of England that they could run their colony in a certain way, laws, structure, and so forth, and operate. and then they could put in the policies that they thought were important for their citizens, like freedom of religion or whatever they wanted to put in. And they came together to create the Constitution, giving up some of those rights and some of those freedoms in return for a greater good, the power of this unified entity called the United States. So, the book is titled What's Right with America. And, what our premise was, and we're not obviously not the only ones who've said this, many people have written this, is that, we're built on the back of this rule of law structure. So we're built on the shoulders of our founders and the structure they created to make a successful country. Fortunately, we had some luck. The timing of when the Constitution got implemented was great. I mean, they were moving away from a monarchy in England, and they wanted to work very hard to make sure we didn't have a king in America. So they had that timing right. They were very upset with what was happening and how the king in England was controlling them. But America was also pretty well located. We got oceans on the east and west, and today we've got allies north and south with Canada and Mexico. We have amazing navigable rivers. So in the interior of the United States, people could grow crops and then get a barge and put those crops and float them to the urban centers. Many countries don't have that degree of navigation. That's lucky. That wasn't anything developed by the founders, but we took that into account and took that advantage. So we had fortune on our side. We had timing on our side. The oceans basically prevented us from being invaded by, the hordes that occurred across the world. And so we were in a place geographically that we could protect ourselves through our military strength and powers, which enabled us over time to get stronger and stronger. But all this said, Denise, and to your listeners, America has been road tested. We've gone through some very, very, very tough times. I mean, we went through the Civil War,
We did. I'm
which
in the South. I know all about it. We
yeah,
call it, yeah,
which almost destroyed the United States. I mean, there
it
was
did.
secession,
Yeah.
and so, but we went through that. The Union won, and the country got reestablished and grew from there. We went through, the Vietnam War and all those challenges. We went through the Civil Rights Movement and all those challenges. We went through the Great Depression and then later the Great Recession. Our democracy has been road tested and come out stronger. You'll look at younger democracies around the world, and they often get real challenged because every democracy is going to go through those challenges. If you haven't come out the other side, there's some thought that maybe that won't happen. So there's a lot of concern about what's happening in America today. But we've been kind of road tested. Our democracy has been kind of road tested. Our founders set up checks and balances for a reason. Article One, the Congress is the first article for a reason. It represents the people at large. The presidency, Article Two, is second in line. I'm sure President Trump doesn't think that, but that's actually how it was structured. And then the judiciary is third in line. But all three of those have these checks and balances that's supposed to apply to each branch to make sure they don't get outside their lane. And then you add in the checks and balances of the states. You add in the checks and balances of the voters. This is all a framing that was designed. The founders knew we'd get somebody who may or may not be the right person running the country. Yet, if we put in the right structure and the right checks and balances, the country we'll get whipsawed a little bit, but the country will come out of it fine. It's tough when you're in the middle of these crises like the Civil War or the Vietnam War. But you come out the other side and you go, yeah, that was rough, but we made it through and we're back. So, so that was really when we spent a lot of time talking about the economy of America, starting with Adam Smith and then people like Milton Friedman. We touch on the education system. We touch on the mistakes the founders made. The founders talked about uh, voters need to be educated. They need to have literacy. And back then, a lot of people weren't very literate. But they never did anything about it, and they left, the issue of education to the states. Some would argue that was a flaw in the founding structure, and maybe it was. Um, and so they recognized some of these things in terms of voting that they should have done. maybe a national education system that might have worked better today if they'd done it, but they didn't. And so we have the state and the local issues. So all of these things, again, we are here by design. We are designed by the founders of America who built this rule of law structure, and then we filled it in with laws federally, state, and locally that made us strong and great. And then I will just transition and stop, Denise, there as so my co-author, Paul Johnson, former mayor of Phoenix, still pretty active in politics. He was a lifelong Democrat and until he was elected mayor as an independent. And then he got frustrated with the Democratic Party, and now he's a hardcore independent. I come from the other side. I was a lifelong Republican, got frustrated with the Republican Party, became an independent. And Paul, had basically, and I didn't even actually know, Denise, you could do this, but he actually acquired a political party, a party that was started by Andrew Yang after was unsuccessful in running for the presidency, I think in 16, started a party called the Forward Party. But at the same time, a number of other people, including Joe Lieberman, who was a Democratic senator from Connecticut, and Christy Todd Whitman, who was a Republican governor of New Jersey, they formed what was then called still is called the No Labels Party. And the No Labels Party had hoped to get candidates to run for president and vice president. They tried to do that in 20 unsuccessfully. They tried to do it in 24 unsuccessfully. They basically got a little worn out, but they got on the ballot in Arizona and a number of states, and they didn't really want to run any local candidates. So Paul, in his infinite wisdom, acquired this party, which was called No Labels Arizona, and changed the name to the Arizona Independent Party. And I'm going to launch into some of the litigation around that, Denise. So I think I'll stop here and make sure I'm going in the direction you want.
No, I'm fascinated. I think wasn't Christy Todd Whitman, didn't she start eBay or something? She was, if I
Uh,
remember correctly, quite an entrepreneur.
yeah, close. Meg Whitman was the eBay starter,
That's
uh,
what
but
I thought.
but
Yeah.
Christy Todd Whitman was governor of New Jersey, and I think she was George H.W. Bush, although it could be George
Oh,
W. Bush,
okay.
as head of the EPA. She ran the EPA for one of the Bushes,
Gotcha.
and she also lined up with she had the lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, who was a Republican, Healy, and they with Andrew Yang launched the Forward Party. The Forward Party really didn't worry that much about candidates. They endorsed many candidates, but what they cared about is problem solving. They actually were the founders of the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress. And I don't know if he's still the chairman of the party or co-chairman of the party, but McWayne Mullen, now the Department of Homeland Security,
Mhm.
he and former senator from Oklahoma, he was a chairman of the Forward Party,
I did not know that. I
there
had
was a
no
Democrat.
clue.
Yeah, so they again they tried to get bipartisan solutions to America's big problems, which really are only going to be solved meaningfully and long term in a bipartisan way. And so we work very closely with the Forward Party. They look at our candidates and endorse. They make their own independent decisions about endorsements. So as the party launched, and I'm on the board, so in Arizona, like in many states, I mean, Republicans and Democrats can't agree whether it's morning or afternoon. I mean, they agree on nothing,
We're
and
talking
and
about the time change, right?
yeah, exactly. They agree.
Or
They
lack
agree.
of. Yeah.
They agree on nothing. But what they did agree on is they actually passed a bill in their committees in the Arizona House and Senate to block the name Arizona Independent Party. Why do they want to block the Arizona Independent Party? They're fearful that the party will compete with Republicans or Democrats. They hate each other, but they don't want to have a third party to have to deal with. So they passed this bill, which they didn't actually pass through the full House and Senate. But if it had gone to the full House and Senate, it would have passed unanimously, and the governor would have signed it. Because what happened is they then went to state court in Arizona and sued, claiming that the voters would be misled because They would claim they're independent voters. Our name was the Arizona Independent Party. They didn't sign up for the Arizona Independent Party. That's true. But actually, in Arizona, when you become an independent voter, you say on your registration, no party designated, NPD, not independent. We use independent as a shorthand, but they are no party designate. So if they look at their voter registration card, it doesn't say IND, it says NPD. And so we weren't misleading any voter, but they claimed there was, and they got a state court judge to rule in their favor and basically blocked use of our name. And we're now on appeal on that. We think that that's a wrong decision. But we will be on the ballot this fall with quite a few candidates, including the first governor candidate. In fact, we have two candidates running in our primary for the Arizona Independent Party, officially known on the ballot as No Labels Arizona. And our gubernatorial candidate will be the one of the two, but we think the one that we had recruited will actually win the primary. He's got to do the work to actually win the primary. He's a three-time, twice CEO, and a third-time head of private healthcare companies. The first company launched Silver Sneakers. I'm at the age where Silver Sneakers, I use that for my benefit, and for seniors get to use Silver Sneakers. But he has his latest company works with states on Medicaid, delivering Medicaid programs cheaper, more effectively, doing more care for Medicaid recipients, and therefore reducing the costs of their care. So, a really cool company called Equality Health. And, Paul was able to convince him after many, many, many meetings that he should run for governor. So, our Democratic governor, who's running for a new term, is pretty much a lifelong politician. There's a primary in the Republican side. Both candidates are lifelong politicians for the most part. And our guy has never run for anything, but he wants to make a difference. So he'll be on the ballot, likely, if he gets it through the primary, but one of them will be on the primary, will be on the ballot this fall, first time in 25 years. And then we have a number of legislators running in our state house and state senate. If one or two of our candidates win, they will hold the power because our houses are so evenly split, and we think there's a high probability that two will be elected this fall. Um, and then what do you do with the power? You focus on solutions that a majority of Arizonans want, not just what a narrow segment of one party's voters want or another. And we'll see. I mean, this is the beginning, not the end. It might be the beginning of the beginning. And but the movement to empower independent voters and give them a home or an option different from what they get if they lean right or left will be real, and I think will be necessary. It'll be the next part of the revolution in America to basically expect our public officials to serve us, not for us to serve them, which it seems to be today.
It, I agree with that. They're supposed to serve us, and I hear this a lot, uniparty. I think a lot of voters don't feel like there's a Republican group and a Democrat group. They're all the same people, and it's
Yeah,
frustrating.
it's very
And people are
frustrating.
becoming aware of it, and they're angry, as we should be. You're supposed to show up, and what did you say earlier? Be problem solvers, take care of your constituents, take care of the rule of law, and then go home. Look, I'm a firm believer in you don't revote incumbents back into town. I think once they've done their 2 terms, they need to go back home, go back to real life. But
Yeah,
that's
there's
just me.
lots of lots of issues about term limits. We have a great term limit. We have term limits in Arizona, but how do the term limits work in Arizona? Well, you can run for both of our House and Senate run for 2-year terms, so they're all on the ballot every 2 years, as they will be this fall. They can run for 3 terms in the House or 3 terms in the Senate, but after their first 3 terms, they can then flip, and if they were 3 terms in the House, they can run for the Senate. And it's amazing that the voters seem to elect them over and over again.
Yeah,
So
we
they'll be in
see
the
that
House.
here too. It's
Yeah, yeah,
frustrating.
everybody hates. they hate the legislators, but they love their own. I mean, it's just, we hate Congress, but we love our congressman, and it's kind of strange. But term limits, effective term limits in Arizona, be you get to run for 3 terms, House or Senate, and then you take a time out. You're out of office for at least 2 years, if not longer, because you want people in there who don't view this as their career or the best job they've ever had. It's a little harder, I'm sure, in Louisiana the same way. I mean, we don't pay our legislators very much money. It's expected to be a part-time job. They only are supposed to work from January till May. They typically work till June or July, but it's supposed to be part-time and even part-time when they're in session. But today's world with raising money and everything else, it's become more of a full-time job. And I think we
Yeah.
we pay our legislators 28,000 a year, which is if somebody's doing that full time, that's just not enough to live.
No, and you said
But
it
we
right.
don't want to.
When you mentioned the word career, listen, in Louisiana, we still operate by and large by the Napoleonic Code,
Yeah.
which nobody really understands. But once you start digging into it, you're like, oh, okay, it's, it's what it is. But
Well,
I firmly believe that people need to be part time. I don't know. I don't understand. This is just me observing personally why people in politics, Congress, Senate get lifelong pensions. I hate that. I hate it with a passion.
yeah, I think if we actually actually could get him retired, it might be a good thing. And by the way, I am a proud graduate of Tulane Law, so I certainly understand the
You
Napoleonic
know the
Code.
code. Yeah. It's
I didn't, but it is.
years ago you could not, and this they gave this up that called the blue laws, but you couldn't buy pantyhose or soda or alcohol on Sunday. And I remember being in a grocery store. I had to go to church. I don't know why I was going to church, but I needed to be at church. And I needed pantyhose at the time, which I don't even know if those things exist anymore. I couldn't buy them. I said, why? Well, you can't. It's a Napoleonic code. I was like, what? Yeah, you can't buy pantyhose. That's how ridiculous some of these. I mean, it's outlawed now, or
Yeah,
they
yeah.
quit enforcing it. But I think my point is, once a law gets on the books, you can't get rid of it. Look at the time change and pantyhose.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think people get, and that's part of the challenge too, Denise. People get so invested in their outcomes and what they did that they just continue to rationalize what they did, and they have this. We all have the confirmatory bias. We just continue to confirm what we believe, and so we hear something that's out of sync, and then we hear something that's in sync, and we ignore the out of sync and just focus on the in sync because that's what we want. We don't really want to change our beliefs, and that's what makes it hard when new people come in and have a better way to approach things successfully. It's just hard to get people like, if you're trying to get Republicans to vote for an independent or Democrats to vote for an independent, and, they voted that way all their life. And it's just really hard to get them to see there are better solutions out there.
One of the worst things you can say to somebody, well, this is the way we've always done it. That
Yeah.
just makes my heart stutter. Like, no, no, stop. Think about what you
Yeah.
just said.
Absolutely. It's just, but you just look at our lives, and then you look at the news and you see the lives of other people and what they deal with, and realize again how lucky we are to live in America. How lucky we are to live in America in the 21st century. I mean, it's just,
Exactly.
and when people complain and say, they just have, you won the lucky gene pool. You happen to be born or moved to America, and all the things. We talk about the rule of law all the time, and one of the things, if you mentioned shopping for pantyhose, you go to the store and you kind of don't expect to be ripped off. I mean, that let's say you just called and ordered it, and they were delivered on a Monday. You expect it will get there, and you expect that the price will be what they were telling you the price was. And that's because through our rule of law, all these foundational issues that make things work. Speed limits, everything. We kind of just forget that those foundational issues we don't even think about. I mean, if you're in Africa or parts of Asia, parts of South America, parts of Europe, you have to think about that all the time. You can't actually get anything done without possibly providing a bribe to some local official. We started talking a little bit about corruption and bribes. Those are exceptions. They are just we just don't typically see that, and when we see it, typically people get prosecuted. In other countries, it's a way of life.
Right.
You want to buy a car in some country, and you may have to bribe some official to actually allow it to be registered and you to get it. And those things we don't have in America, and we do continually forget that. We don't. Well, I don't even forget it. What many people don't even think about it. It's like that's the way it always is. Well, it's not the way it is around the world, and that's where when we talk about elected officials, we don't, first of all, do no harm. We say in the medical space. Um, so don't screw it up. But more importantly, you're elected for a purpose. Go get something done that matters. Don't it's not it doesn't matter about you raising money. You think that you've been sent to Congress or the state house, and you spend most of your time raising money. That unfortunately is what's happened in today's world. But we didn't send you to that place to raise money. We sent you to get something done and get something done that matters to 70, 80% of the populace. And instead of making speeches, and I just amazed at how many elected officials, and I've specifically chosen never to be one, but they just get so flattered to go to some rubber chicken dinner, nonprofit event, and then be recognized by the master of ceremonies. We have Congressman so and so in the audience. Stand up, take a bow, get an applause. It's like, save me. You are public servants. We should be better off recognizing the people who put you there than the person who got elected. But that's the world we've kind of created, that they get viewed as having a superior rather than an equal or inferior position to the people who put them there.
I have noticed that. And, we're talking about the 4th, and we're coming up on our 250th year. Oh, this is something that I hear quite a bit, and I'm never sure why people keep insisting on this, but I hear quite a lot that America is an experiment. I think we're past that, don't you?
I think we're past it in many ways. Although the founders, created the process, to make a more perfect union. And in the world of business, we call those BHAGs, a big, hairy, audacious goal, which you never achieve. And so, the country, started out with a slave owning mentality. Women couldn't vote. Native Americans couldn't vote. Certainly, African Americans couldn't vote. They were, none of them were. Women were Americans, but none of the others were Americans until laws got passed later. But we evolved. We moved down the path to a more perfect union. We, put in the right of women to vote, and Native Americans and African Americans. We ended slavery. All these things that early on were problems in America, um, and issues in America got got changed. And I think there's more to go. There's plenty more to go. And that's what's great about America, to constantly reinvent itself to get better and better.
I think we're a very strong country, no matter what people are saying online or screaming about, you know, with their weird little riots, which I don't really understand at all. But I have always been a proud American. I was born that way. It never occurred to me to be anything different. And no matter what I see now, or I'm observing or discarding, I am still very proud of America. And I'm proud to be an American.
Me too, and I think most people are proud. They may say they're not because something bothers them, but they really are proud to be. They the things that they do and the things that they take advantage of. They go, that matters. That really matters. And I would suggest for your listeners who are frustrated with things aren't working the way they want it to be working. I mean, the power is with the people. But if the people don't exercise the power, clearly voting is the most important thing. Do not vote. Make sure you are registered to vote and make sure you vote, because that's the single biggest way to make sure we get the right representatives in office. But then in between voting, be engaged. I have a fascinating dialogue going on with some ex-fraternity brothers from my undergrad, and one a hardcore Trump supporter, one a fairly hardcore Democrat, and I'm more a libertarian. And trying to say, okay, Trump supporter, you don't like what's happening over here with the war, you don't like this. What are you doing about it? Rather than telling me or the two of us what you think should happen, are you calling your congressman? Are you emailing your congressman? Are you sending a letter? Or if something's really bad, are you considering protesting, or are you just going out to barbecue? And too many people expect other people to do it. Oh, we should stop that. We should stop spending too much money. We should stop being, in a deficit situation. Agreed. So what are you doing? What are you telling? You've got a local person. The states can't run deficits. Only the federal government can run deficits. So have you talked to your congressman? Have you sent a letter to your congressman? Have you expressed your views? Um, and it's and the vast majority of people do nothing. I mean, just they kind of expect somebody else to do it. And that isn't kind of the framework for the power of America. You have a power to express your views and to insist that somebody at least acknowledge it. And if your congressman ignores you, well, get another congressman.
I think we're
So
doing a lot of that right now.
yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
I
And
do too.
we just and there's fundamental change in America only occurred through the engagement of citizens. I mean, in some cases, it was a war like the Civil War or the protest movement, the
Or the Tea
protests
Party,
or the Tea
the
Party. I mean,
yeah.
people made changes because they, went to the streets and expressed their views. And in addition, they were expressing their views directly with their elected officials. But they weren't just being passive and just wringing their hands and saying, "If only," and I over the years have had the opportunity to talk to many elected officials, and they would tell me, "You would be amazed at how few people can move the dialogue because so many people do nothing." So the one person who shows up or calls or writes an email or writes a letter, those the offices track those calls, and it might be 50 people that actually take somebody's view and start to change it, recognizing, I thought everybody supported this, but clearly I'm wrong. They really support that. Well, it's only 50 people, but 50 vocal people who made their views known. And so I just encourage everybody if they're, and I would encourage, I was going to say, I encourage everybody to express their frustration. But if they like what they're getting, I mean, express your appreciation. I mean, these
Yeah,
folks
there's
could do
that too.
something
There's 2
else.
sides, right?
Yeah, they could do something else. I mean, I'm always amazed at how important it seems for people in Congress to want to remain in power, so to speak. Knowing
Mhm.
that most of those people could get a bigger job, they could serve on a paid corporate board, make much more money, not have to raise money, but do something else. Don't abandon your principles. Don't abandon your reputation. Don't do things that you said you would never do because you want to retain power. And it's like, is your reputation worth the power? And today's world, so many it appears to be. So I'm just kind of like many amazed that people think that's inappropriate. If you think the president is doing something inappropriate or taking payments on something you think is inappropriate, express that. And if you can't express it, leave and let somebody else come in who will. So
And and I love what you're saying, if you're going to write or you're going to text or you're going to call them, there's a few things that you really should pay attention to. Be polite. Don't start cursing. Don't use the F-bombs. I'm getting good and sick of those online. Be logical, be specific, and say thank you and hang up.
Yeah.
If you're nasty, chances are it's going to go straight to the trash can.
Right, you're absolutely right. I've met many people probably, the one place we often seem to intersect with elected officials are school boards. And I have worked with many schools over the years and their school boards. And I'm just amazed when you're there talking about, maybe we need to close this school and rebuild right next door because the physical plant is terrible. It's a lousy place for people for kids to get educated, on and on and on. And the protests and the screaming and the signs, I mean, I do not know how somebody ever would serve on a school board. It's courageous, and it's typically for nothing. They don't get paid a nickel. And,
Yeah,
but
they
yeah,
don't.
people would not be that ugly in their family. They would not be that ugly, with their neighbor, but they're sure happy to be that ugly in those kind of settings. They've lost the graciousness and the respect that hopefully their parents taught them, and it should stop. You're
And
right.
that's important.
Absolutely.
Respect. And honestly, if yeah, I read a lot of stuff on X because I tend to get my news over there. I will not turn the TV on and watch any of them. I don't want that. It's propaganda, in my view. I don't want it in my living room, but I want to be able to find something that I can go, let me go dig deeper into. I don't take it at face value. That's not how my brain works. But I'm telling you, if anybody in a Walmart parking lot spoke to me the way some of these people speak to each other, and anybody on Twitter or LinkedIn, I'd need bail money.
Oh,
I really would. Yeah, I was like,
you're
"Oh, no."
absolutely One
Yeah,
of one of my many careers was in the newspaper business. I was fortunate to run the local papers. We had 2 of them, when I was there in Tucson, Arizona, and we launched an online, but 5th online newspaper that went directly to the internet in Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, 1995. That's how long ago it was, and, where we put the newspaper online and we allowed real-time, information, to be presented there, and, uh when we launched, the person who launched it was a rocket scientist. I was just the money guy. He was a movie critic for the local morning newspaper, and his whole vision was, when we write an article in the newspaper, it's kind of one way. We write the article. Occasionally we get a call, occasionally we get a letter to the editor, but 99% of the time we never hear back. But when we go online, we will create these news groups and we will moderate these news groups and we will have this kind of two-way communication. It'll be amazing. It'll help democracy. It'll be wonderful. And that was kind of his vision. A year after we launched, he came into my office and said, "Oh my God, we've lost control. There is no way to get it back. It's all anonymous, venting and ranting, and just the most ugly kind of communication." So back at the beginning, many people thought this would be a way to expand democracy and communication across America. And the social media component kind of made it worse. And, back then we thought if people weren't anonymous, they wouldn't say what they would say when they are. But
exactly.
we're not
Keyboard
seeing
warriors.
but we're not seeing that today on X or other places. People are perfectly willing to put their real name out there and call you a four-letter word. I mean, it's what happened to whatever Christian values people were raised with, or whatever religious values or moral values. It's kind of shocking how people or how we've evolved into this kind of vitriol that helps nobody, makes people
See,
angrier and angrier,
you say
and
evolved, I say devolved.
devolved is the right word, Denise. Yeah. So I mean, that sounds kind of like a one-way door we went through. We can go back through a door. I mean, the country and the public and the individuals and average citizens and leaders and elected officials, they can make the changes. They just have to, link arms and say, this can't stand. I am, having been in the newspaper business, and I'm an attorney. I have always been a Amendment absolutist, and for those of your listeners might not, the First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom to lobby. By the way, everyone seems to hate lobbyists, but Lobbying is actually protected in the First Amendment. The right to petition your representatives for resolving a grievance is the way it's framed. But I've always believed that more speech is offsets ugly speech. I'm less inclined to believe that today,
I
and
was
it's
going to ask you about that because I believe in the freedom to ignore the press.
yeah, and so freedom of speech has never been absolute. I mean, the old line is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That is not freedom of speech. You can't damage someone's reputation through falsehoods. That's libelous and subject to challenge. So there's always been some limits, but the absolute and people become and if Paul, my co-author, were on, he would disagree with me. He's a free speech absolutist. But I look at the structure of the Constitution. The Bill of Rights are amendments to the Constitution. They arrive 4 or 5 years after the Constitution was ratified, and some states didn't ratify until the Bill of Rights was there. But the basic Constitution says nothing about freedom of speech. It was the Bill of Rights that protected freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of association and lobbying. And so the foundational document was amended to provide those protections. So freedom of speech is not absolute under the Constitution. It's well protected under the Bill of Rights, but it's not absolute. And in today's world, we see why it shouldn't be.
And you just told me something I didn't know, and I'm a bit embarrassed by it, but I didn't know about the freedom to lobby. I just didn't.
No one wants to talk about. There are only two arguable industries that are specifically referenced in the Constitution. I mean, there's a few more. Slave trade was protected in the Constitution for the first 20 years, but freedom of press they separated freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So they knew what newspapers were. That's all they had back then. But freedom of the press industry was protected, and lobbying, the right to lobby your representative for something that you want to have done or something that shouldn't be done.
If it
And
were only that simple, though.
if it were only that simple, and really the protection runs to the individual, not to the individual lobbyists. You can make an argument the protection of freedom of press runs to the entity, but you can make an argument that it's the rights of people when they write print, that's press, which kind of protects them more than the newspaper industry, for example. But there's plenty of books that have been written about all that, and it's way too nuanced to spend any time on.
I understand. And see, that's the beauty. You can say yay or nay to this, but that's the beauty of all of us having the right to our own thoughts, the right to speech. You and I aren't going to agree on everything ever.
Right.
And why should
Ever.
we? We're completely separate people.
I,
But
I,
I
I
think that's
would,
what's missing today in today's discourse. Well, if you don't believe this, you're cut off my Christmas card list. Really?
yeah, yeah,
You
it
know?
really is. I would think most of your listeners would say, "Where did I have some of the more interesting conversations in my life?" It was somebody I didn't agree with, but I
You and me
heard
both. Yep.
why they felt that way. I mean, even after I listened to them, I may not have felt the way. I didn't change my views, but it made me think that there is another side to the story, and there's always another side to the story. And there's always, when somebody goes, well, you made a mistake. It's not typically one person making a mistake. It's typically at least two who've shared in that mistake, and often more than that. And if we don't listen to people who don't agree with us, we don't evolve. Our brains don't get stretched. We don't think, I said early on in this conversation, why is it that we fund through the federal government mass transit in Coolidge, Arizona? Well, somebody would say, here's why we do that. Here are the environmental impacts that affect people in Arizona and across the country. I would still probably not agree with the mechanism to do that, but I might not disagree with the concept that somebody was trying to deal with. that we would like lower pollution. One of the great things we have in America is one of the most pollution-free countries anywhere. It wasn't always the case. The Cayuga, that's how you pronounce it, a river in Cleveland went on fire because of the hazardous material in the river. And from there, the Clean Air Act was passed under Richard Nixon, and we cleaned up our waters, and we cleaned up our air, and we cleaned up our environment. And so you wouldn't have those changes if you didn't listen to the other side or another side. There's multiple sides to the same issue. And we've lost that to some degree as we've kind of collected ourselves into communities of like interests. We live in neighborhoods of similar education levels, similar income levels. We might live in a neighborhood that's 95% Christian or 80% Jewish or 30% Muslim or whatever. We've kind of reorganized everybody into these narrow subsegments of American life, and we've lost some of that opportunity to actually interact with people who think differently than we do. I've been a longtime believer in diversity, not to check a box about whether this race is there or this sex is there, but more importantly, I'm a white male. If I don't listen to a non-white male perspective, I don't have a clue what that perspective is. And I might think I do, but I don't. I don't understand their challenges. And if I'm running a business and many of our customers don't look like me and certainly aren't as old as I am, so diversity of thought in that equation, not diversity of race or sex or age, but diversity of thinking, because those people will think differently. And we can create together a better business, a better community, a better state, a better America by listening to people we disagree with and saying, could we solve that issue together? This might be a solution neither of us have thought about.
Right,
It
and
do-
that's where curiosity comes into play. If
Absolutely.
you're not curious about your neighbors or the people that you're talking to, and I've had some amazing conversations with people that I would never vote for their party, barely vote for my own. Really, I mean, I'm independent as you are. But honestly, some of the most interesting conversations have been with people who are way different politically than I am, but I learned things. I'm like, "Really?" Like what you just said about, I think it was the little town. Was there an impact at some point that had to do with the community? Was there an impact that had to do with the geography? I mean, how did it happen? That's what I wanna know. Why
Well,
aren't we funding that? Okay, give me some history. Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know that either.
and
Right.
are there better ways? Are there
Yeah, yeah.
we want this outcome
And do
in
we
the
need to keep
environment.
doing that? Is it necessary any longer?
Give another local story. We have a community called Globe, Arizona. It's a big copper mining area, and we face in Arizona. We don't, not unfortunately not as often as we'd like. Monsoon rains that come in the summer. It's massive thunderstorms, giant. We don't have tornadoes like you have a little bit there.
However, right
We
now
don't have
it's mud
hurricanes.
season.
Yeah,
Every single day in May, it
but
rains.
But we have
It
we have
rains.
we have monsoons that come infrequently, and when they do, they're massive downpours, and they just flood. And so this
Right.
poor little, very poor community in Arizona, again, I mean, more of a legacy of the copper mining industry that's mostly moved to other countries, has had this massive floods. They applied for Fed relief under the FEMA rules. Well, the
FEMA, right.
changes under the Trump administration, they no longer fund that stuff. Well, and the club then said to the state of Arizona, "Can you fund it?" And the state said, "Well, we don't have the money." So this little community that is facing probably a $2 million hit to be able to make sure the next flood gets channeled away from their town and doesn't damage or destroy people's lives. Is more safe. Is not in right at the moment, doesn't have any funding, and there are stories like that all across America. Maybe the answer is not the federal government should fund it all, but there's a problem that needs to be solved. And I look at the Arizona state budget, which when you count all the passengers, is probably $25 billion. we can find $1.5 million to help these poor people in Globe who cannot tax themselves for that. They just don't have the tax space. And but as we've punted to the federal government, we haven't created the capacity at the state level or the county level or the community level to do those things because we basically said, well, we don't have to do it. The feds will take care of it. That's the problem with federal payment, in my view, is we've eliminated those capacities to and people hate the T word, the tax word, but if you want services, if you want a military, if you want border security, if you want highways, you want roads, you want police, you want fire, you want clean air, clean water, you actually need to pay taxes to accomplish that. And the notion, the other side of the equation where the Democrats going, we want all these things for us, but we want to tax the rich. We don't want to tax us. Oh, no. I call that the Santa Claus effect. I want more presents and I want Santa to bring them to me, which is what the federal government has become. Santa, a very broke Santa, with a day
Yeah.
of reckoning where break is going to basically be death if we don't get our act together. But we need to get the balance back right, to the balance between the states and the federal government, the balance between the states and their local communities. We need to figure out how to put the decision making on things like revenue, taxes, user fees at a local level where people say, I want that park. I'm a big pickleball player. I want that pickleball court, but therefore I have to decide to pay for it. I can't expect the federal government to build my pickleball court in Durango, Colorado, wherever I am at the time. Um, and we've lost that. We've lost that capacity because it's so easy to have somebody in Congress who's not spending their money to basically spend our money without almost any consequence. We got to fix it,
Yeah. I
and we
agree.
can fix it, and we
I
can fix, and we
agree.
have to. We have to. If we need better people, let's get better people. Let's we the people, as the voters and as people who have higher expectations, put those expectations on the line and hold people accountable. In America, we can do that. In other countries, they can't. And
I
if you have
wanted
a
to,
king, you can't do it because the king will
yeah,
take over.
I know. And I wanted to ask you, you said Globe, Arizona, right?
I did.
Okay. Can the Army Corps of Engineers help them?
Some of the same limitations apply. One of the problem with the Army Corps of Engineers is we've built the Army Corps started in an amazing way to basically support where our troops are going and build the runways and build the roads and build the Quonset huts. They were supporting the military. Well, as we became less militarized and fewer wars, no government agency wants to basically say, well, I guess our job is done or we can make our job smaller. They created a new job and now so now they do things like that. But they also come with breathtaking amount of expensive infrastructure. Whether their salaries or their what it takes to build things. It would be so much cheaper if you went to your local person in Globe, your local contractor, who's perfectly willing to work Sunday evening and to Monday morning to put the roof on, because that's what you do when you're in the private sector, when you're looking to make money. You could do it so much more cheaply, by using local people to solve those problems. The question is who's going to pay for it. If you get the state might want to have we don't have an Army Corps of Engineers, but I'm sure there's an equivalent agency. And then we pay that overhead to do that. So we've created these legacy organizations who are very good at getting something done, but not very good at getting it done efficiently and cost effectively. It takes a boatload of money I mean, as we've just seen with President Trump wanting to put blue on the bottom of the reflecting pools. That number was like, oh, we can do it for $2 million. It's gone to $14 million. And some of that is because they didn't see things that they were aware of, and some of it's simply overhead and regulation. even in that environment. So I'm not a big believer that the federal government should do local projects. Should the federal government provide some funding? Maybe a piece of the funding, but maybe less of a piece than they typically do, and try to get more of the work down to people who can do it efficiently and effectively. And I think the local community is by far the most effective. They've learned how to, work for 15, $20 an hour or less in some cases. Federal government can't do anything for less than 10x that.
Right. And the reason I bring up the Corps of Engineers is, as you know, because you're educated here, their footprints are all over this state,
All over. And
everywhere.
all over. And we've asked them to do, and when they looked at World War II and being over, it's like, well, we have all these people. What are we going to do? Well, let's help build dams and levees and, and bridge supports. And, they ended up converting, all of which was important work. And some of it a legacy of the New Deal and the Great Depression. The work needed to be done, but it probably could have been done more efficiently. But you know, you can't get rid of all waste. It would be nice to waste less and then have more money to do even more things that we need to do. We want to
I
land
agree
people
with you.
on Mars. It's going to take many, many trillions of dollars to do that. Some would say it's not worth it. I'm a former rocket scientist by schooling, and I think it is greatly worth it. But that's me.
I have to ask you, and I'm going to just, this is an aside, but you just said something interesting. You always say something interesting, but one of my recent guests, well, not recent, it was last year, was one of they're calling them astronauts, but are you familiar with CHAPEA, part of NASA?
I am not.
Okay, go look for it. Go look for CHAPEA, CHEPEA, I think it is. They've got 4 people in this. It's a man-made construction. It's in Texas, and it was, what do you call it when they create these things out of plastic? What is that called when they?
Oh, like 3D printing or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah. I c just escaped my head entirely. But they 3D printed this thing, and they put these people into this environment for over a year. And he's been in there about 6 months now, I think, and they can't come out. They are priming to go. They're learning about Mars. They're being trained, and they're part of NASA. It is fascinating.
That's
Go
amazing.
look for
Yeah.
that. Go to NASA and then look for I'll send you the links.
Good.
And his wife was here not too long ago and, just kinda keeping me in touch, like, "How is he doing?" She said, "They're doing well." And I found this fascinating, they are happier than the NASA real astronauts are. I guess those guys fight a lot. These people in this hut, it's a unit, it's small, it's only about 1,500 square feet. They have to get along because 'cause they're there for a
Yeah.
year, but it's just fascinating. So anyway, that's just a total
Oh, that's
aside.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great stuff. And we in Arizona also had the biosphere. This
Oh,
big
yeah.
big dome where we had people live there for I think it was 2 years. I mean, a much bigger location than 1,500 square feet, but they learned a lot of things. They actually are now on Biosphere 3 out there. They finally got that donated to the University of Arizona, and they're now trying to model environmental issues, how they are going to affect ocean currents. And I mean, it's just kind of amazing science. And but it requires somebody. I think it was funded by the Hunt brothers out of Texas, the original biosphere, to try to figure out could we live in those controlled environments with same kind of notion. If we were to go to the moon or Mars and everything else, and they come with a lot of complications until you see that you can't actually enclose everything. You can't actually get the right oxygen carbon dioxide balance. They actually had to cheat at one point in the biosphere to open a vent to bring some oxygen in because they
Oh,
couldn't generate enough oxygen. They were
alright.
getting too much carbon dioxide, and so that was a big news story about how they kind of cheated. But so
Now
anyway,
I've got
yeah,
something
yeah.
else to go look at.
Well, you have some fascinating guests, and
I do.
I'm not one of them, but
Oh, yes, you are.
I am very delighted to continue to be on your show, and so appreciative of your comments about our book. And I certainly encourage your viewers, especially those who are either independent or independent-minded, and frankly, everybody's independent-minded, hold elected officials to account, and if they're not doing the job, find others, and maybe the independent movement will be one of those ways to find others. I mean, what we talk about in our party is we hope that we can basically, lead well, we don't have to do this, that actually the current, uh, people from the Republicans and Democrats will work in a bipartisan manner to solve problems. They will no longer just salute their party leaders and follow what they want to do. They'll work for us, not their party leaders, and they'll solve the problems. And if they do, we don't need the Arizona Independent Party or the No Labels Party or the Forward Party because they are now doing what they were elected to do, solve the problems that the greater part of America wants solved or their community. And do it in a way that's efficient and doesn't spend our taxpayer dollars and unreasonably, only spends it for the things that make sense. Recognize the role of the federal government as a subservient role to the states who are in a subservient role to the people. And all of that. Yeah, we don't think we'll ever exit because we don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime. But maybe there's always hope. So
Exactly. And I think a lot of people are just saying, we don't have to live like this.
we don't.
And they're looking for alternatives. So I wish you guys the best. And tell Paul I said hi.
I absolutely will. He says hi back because I mentioned I'd be on your show.
Oh, good. Well, listen, everybody. Today's conversation with Larry Aldrich offered a grounded look at what's right with America, not through headlines or slogans, but through history, data, and the principles that have shaped the country over time. And we talked about the importance of individual responsibility, the role of the rule of law, and how a system of checks and balances continues to influence stability and growth, even when it's under pressure. And I would say when it's really under pressure is when you need it. And at its core, this discussion was about perspective, stepping back far enough to see what is working, what isn't, what we can do about it. And honestly, in my opinion, it's a call to get busy. Don't just stand around and wait for somebody else to do it. Get busy. And I always appreciate Larry joining me and sharing that lens with us. And I am Denise Griffitts. Thank you for listening, and I will see you each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Larry, thank you so much. I always appreciate chatting with you.
You are so welcome, and thanks for having me. Thank you for your listeners for listening.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.